Ethan Cole lived a quiet life in the small town of Maplewood, Ohio. He was an ordinary man with an ordinary job as a librarian at the local public library. His days were filled with organizing books, helping patrons find what they needed, and occasionally recommending novels to those who asked for suggestions. Ethan loved his work because it allowed him time to read during slow hours. In the evenings, he often walked home through the woods behind the library, enjoying the calmness of nature after a long day indoors. One evening, as Ethan strolled along his usual path, something unusual caught his eye. There, partially buried beneath fallen leaves, was a strange object glowing faintly under the silver light of the moon. It looked like a key, but not one he had ever seen before. The metal shimmered with colors that seemed to shift whenever he moved his head. Curiosity got the better of him, and he bent down to pick it up. The moment his fingers touched the artifact, everything around him changed. The world dissolved into swirling colors, blues, greens, purples, all blending together, until Ethan felt dizzy. When the chaos finally settled, he found himself lying on soft grass in a place unlike anything he had ever seen. Trees towered above him, their leaves glowing softly like lanterns. Strange creatures darted between the trunks, some resembling deer but with antlers made of crystal, others looking like foxes with feathers instead of fur. The air smelled sweet, almost floral, and there was a faint hum, like distant music playing just beyond hearing. Before Ethan could fully process where he was, a group of people approached him. They wore elegant robes adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered when they moved. Their ears were pointed, and their eyes sparkled with intelligence. One of them knelt beside him and spoke in a language Ethan didn't understand. Another stepped forward and tried again, this time in broken English. "You, human?" she asked hesitantly. Ethan nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of what was happening. "Yes," he replied. "I'm Ethan." The group exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Finally, one of them, a tall man with golden hair, spoke up. "Humans are only legends here," he said. "We thought your kind had vanished centuries ago." Confused, Ethan struggled to sit up. "Where am I?" he asked. "You are in Lemuria," the woman who first addressed him answered. Her name was Lily Harper, as he would later learn. She explained briefly that Lemuria was a magical realm where magic flowed naturally like air or water. Everyone born here had some form of magical ability, whether it was casting spells, controlling elements, or communicating with animals. Lily and her companions helped Ethan to his feet and led him back to their village. Along the way, they told him more about their world. Lemuria was divided into several kingdoms, each ruled by its own monarch. Magic was central to every aspect of life here, from farming to warfare, and those without it were considered incomplete, or even cursed. This revelation worried Ethan. If everyone relied on magic, how would he survive without any abilities? When they arrived at the village, Ethan noticed curious stares from the villagers. Some whispered behind their hands, while others openly gawked at him. Despite their obvious fascination, or perhaps fear of him, no one treated him unkindly. Instead, they offered him food and a place to rest. Lily stayed close by, answering his questions patiently and explaining things about Lemuria that might help him adapt over the next few days. Ethan learned more about this strange new world. Magic was everywhere, in the rivers that sang lullabies, in the stones that pulsed with energy, even in the wind that carried whispers of ancient secrets. Yet despite being surrounded by such wonders, Ethan remained untouched by them. He couldn't summon fire, manipulate objects with his mind, or do any of the things the villagers took for granted. At first, this made him feel useless and out of place. But Lily saw something different in Ethan. While others focused on what he lacked, she noticed qualities they overlooked: his sharp mind, his calm demeanor, and his knack for solving problems creatively. One afternoon, while exploring the outskirts of the village, they came across a broken irrigation system that threatened to flood nearby fields. The villagers gathered around, debating how to fix it using magic. Ethan listened quietly, analyzing the situation. Then, without saying a word, he began rearranging rocks and redirecting the flow of water manually. Within minutes, the problem was solved. The villagers watched in awe. None of them had thought to solve the issue without magic. For the first time since arriving, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe he didn't need magic to contribute here. Maybe his skills and perspective could be valuable in ways no one had considered. However, not everyone shared Lily's admiration for Ethan. Rumors spread quickly throughout Lemuria about the powerless human living among the elves. Some viewed him as a curiosity, while others saw him as a threat. Among these skeptics was Victor Kane, a powerful sorcerer known for his arrogance and ambition. Victor believed magic was the ultimate measure of worth and dismissed Ethan as nothing, more than a freak accident brought to their world by chance. Despite the challenges ahead, Ethan resolved to stay positive. With Lily's support and his own determination, he hoped to prove that being different wasn't a weakness. It was an opportunity to show the world something new. Little did he know, his journey in Lemuria was only beginning. News of Ethan Cole's presence in Lemuria traveled quickly, reaching the ears of King Alden Drake, ruler of the realm. The king was intrigued by the idea of a human and ancient species thought to have vanished long ago, appearing without any magical abilities. He summoned Ethan to Arcanes, the capital city, to meet him personally. Accompanied by Lily Harper, Ethan embarked on the journey, feeling both nervous and curious about what awaited him. Arcanes was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The city sparkled with enchantments, its streets paved with glowing stones that lit up as people walked over them. Towers stretched high into the sky, their spires adorned with crystals that refracted sunlight into dazzling rainbows. Everywhere Ethan looked, he saw evidence of magic woven into daily life. Merchants used spells to organize their wares. Children played games involving floating orbs of light. And even the air carried a faint hum of energy dot when they arrived at the palace. Ethan was ushered into the grand hall where King Alden sat on his throne. The king was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair that shimmered like moonlight. His piercing blue eyes studied Ethan carefully before he spoke. "You are the human who appeared in our world without magic," the king said. It wasn't a question but a statement. Ethan nodded respectfully. "Yes, your majesty." The king leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Tell me, Ethan Cole, how do you survive without magic? In Lemuria, it is not just a tool but a part of who we are." Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't know much about magic, but I've learned to rely on other things, like thinking carefully, observing details, and working together with others." The king seemed pleased by this response. However, not everyone shared his interest in Ethan. Among those present was Victor Kane, a renowned sorcerer known for his mastery of elemental magic. Victor sneered openly at Ethan, clearly unimpressed by the notion of someone succeeding without powers. "A human with no magic is like a bird without wings," Victor remarked loudly enough for everyone to hear. What use could such a creature possibly have? His words drew murmurs of agreement from some of the nobles gathered in the hall. Others, however, remained silent, watching Ethan closely to see how he would respond. Ethan simply smiled politely and said nothing. He knew better than to engage in arguments with someone like Victor, especially when surrounded by people who might judge him harshly. To test Ethan's worth, King Alden announced a series of trials designed to showcase magical skill and ingenuity. Participants would face challenges meant to push their abilities to the limit. While most competitors were skilled mages eager to prove themselves, Ethan was also invited to join a decision that sparked controversy among the crowd. Many doubted whether a powerless human could even compete, let alone succeed. The first trial took place in a vast labyrinth filled with illusions designed to confuse and trap intruders. Competitors entered one by one, tasked with finding their way out as quickly as possible. Most relied on spells to dispel the illusions or enhance their senses, allowing them to navigate the maze with ease. When it was Ethan's turn, he stepped inside without hesitation. Without magic to guide him, he relied on logic and observation instead. He noticed subtle inconsistencies in the walls and floors, patterns that didn't quite match reality. By focusing on these details, he avoided falling for the traps and steadily made his way toward the exit. Meanwhile, outside the labyrinth, spectators watched eagerly as participants emerged one by one. Victor Kane completed the challenge swiftly, earning applause from the crowd. When Ethan finally exited the maze, his time wasn't the fastest, but it was respectable, not bad for someone without magic. Some murmured in surprise, while others dismissed his success as beginner's luck. Victor, however, grew increasingly irritated. He couldn't understand how someone so ordinary could perform well in a magical competition bout as the trials continued. Ethan faced new challenges that tested not only physical prowess, but also mental agility. One trial involved protecting a fragile orb from being shattered by magical projectiles fired by automated constructs. Most competitors used shields or barriers created through spells to deflect the attacks. Ethan, unable to conjure such defenses, devised another strategy. Using materials scattered around the arena, he built a makeshift barricade to hide behind while timing his movements carefully to avoid direct hits. His resourcefulness impressed many, though Victor remained unconvinced. Lily stayed by Ethan's side throughout the trials, offering encouragement and advice whenever she could. She admired his ability to think differently and adapt to situations where others might struggle. Her growing respect for Ethan deepened their bond, though she still found herself puzzled by his lack of magic. How could someone thrive in a world defined by something they didn't possess? Despite Ethan's growing popularity among spectators, whispers of suspicion lingered. Victor Kane began spreading rumors that Ethan must be hiding some kind of secret, power that there was no way he could succeed otherwise. These accusations reached Lady Evelyn Cross, a cunning noblewoman seeking to expand her influence over the kingdom. Evelyn saw potential in using Ethan's presence to further her own ambitions. If she could expose him as a fraud, she might gain favor with the king and weaken his trust in outsiders. Together, Victor and Evelyn hatched a plan to discredit Ethan during the final trial. This challenge required participants to guard a sacred crystal from shadow beasts creatures born of darkness and chaos. The goal was to protect the crystal until sunrise, when its power would stabilize and end the threat. Most competitors prepared elaborate defensive strategies involving complex spells and enchanted weapons. Ethan, lacking access to such tools, focused instead on understanding the behavior of the shadow beasts and planning accordingly. When night fell, the trial began. Waves of shadow beasts surged toward the crystal, their forms shifting unpredictably. Competitors fought valiantly, unleashing torrents of fire, ice, and lightning to drive the creatures back. Ethan, positioned near the crystal, observed the battle carefully. He noticed that the beasts tended to cluster together when attacking, leaving openings in their ranks. With quick thinking, he directed nearby participants to focus their attacks on specific areas, creating opportunities for others to regroup and reinforce their defenses. For a while, everything seemed under control. Then, chaos erupted. Agents loyal to Evelyn and Victor sabotaged the protective wards surrounding the crystal, causing cracks to form across its surface. At the same time, loud accusations rang out, blaming Ethan for the damage. Spectators gasped in shock, unsure whom to believe. Ethan froze, overwhelmed by the sudden betrayal. But Lily stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension. "This isn't right," she declared. "Ethan has done nothing wrong." Her words gave Ethan the strength to stand his ground. Though framed and cornered, he refused to give up. Instead, he rallied the remaining competitors, urging them to work together to repair the crystal and fend off the shadow beasts. His calm leadership inspired unity among the group, turning what could have been a disaster into a coordinated effort. By sunrise, the crystal was saved, and the shadow beasts retreated. Victor and Evelyn's plan had failed, but their actions revealed deeper conspiracies within the kingdom. As Ethan walked away from the trial grounds, exhausted yet triumphant, he realized that his journey in Lemuria was far from over. The aftermath of the final trial left Lemuria buzzing with tension. Ethan Cole had proven himself capable, even without magic, but the accusations against him cast a shadow over his achievements. Lady Evelyn Cross and Victor Kane's sabotage attempt was exposed, yet their actions raised questions about who else might be plotting against him. Rumors spread like wildfire, painting Ethan as either a hero or a threat, depending on who told the story. For Ethan, the weight of these suspicions felt suffocating. King Alden Drake ordered an investigation into the sabotage, but Evelyn and Victor worked tirelessly to cover their tracks. They knew that if their roles were uncovered, it would mean disgrace or worse. To protect themselves, they decided to escalate their efforts. Evelyn began gathering allies among the nobility, whispering fears about Ethan's presence in Lemuria. She claimed he was part of an ancient prophecy foretelling the downfall of magical rule, using half-truths and clever manipulation to turn influential figures against him. Victor, meanwhile, focused on discrediting Ethan publicly, spreading lies about how he must have secretly used forbidden magic during the trials. Ethan found himself increasingly isolated. Many of the competitors who had once admired his ingenuity now avoided him, unsure whether to trust him. Even some villagers who had welcomed him initially grew wary, fearing that associating with him might bring trouble. Lily Harper remained steadfastly by his side, though she too struggled under the pressure. Her loyalty to Ethan made her a target of ridicule, with some accusing her of being naive or manipulated by the powerless human. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in the small room provided for him at the palace, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Finn O'Connell, a dwarf blacksmith Ethan had met briefly during his time in Arcanis. Finn carried a bundle of tools slung over his shoulder and wore a determined expression. "You look like you could use some help," Finn said gruffly. Ethan nodded, grateful for the company. Over the next hour, Finn shared news from outside the palace walls. There were whispers of rebellion brewing among those loyal to Evelyn, and Finn believed Ethan needed allies if he hoped to survive the growing storm. Finn wasn't the only one reaching out. Clara Wells, a reclusive druid known for her deep connection to nature, also approached Ethan. She revealed that she had been investigating the artifact that brought him to Lemuria. According to ancient texts, the key was linked to a prophecy about a human destined to unite the fractured kingdoms of Lemuria and restore balance to the realm. Clara warned Ethan that powerful forces would stop at nothing to prevent this prophecy from coming true. Though overwhelmed by the revelation, Ethan resolved not to let fear dictate his actions. With Lily, Finn, and Clara forming a small but loyal group around him, Ethan began planning his next move. He knew he couldn't confront Evelyn and Victor directly, not yet. Instead, he focused on gathering evidence of their conspiracy. Clara used her knowledge of forgotten places to uncover hidden records detailing Evelyn's rise to power and Victor's obsession with eliminating anyone who challenged his dominance. Finn reached out to contacts within the artisan guilds, learning that Evelyn had been stockpiling enchanted weapons and recruiting mercenaries. Meanwhile, Lily scoured the library archives, piecing together fragments of the prophecy tied to Ethan's arrival. Their efforts paid off when they discovered a crucial piece of information. Evelyn and Victor planned to seize control of the sacred crystal permanently. The crystal, which had stabilized after the final trial, still held immense magical energy. If they succeeded, they could use its power to overthrow King Alden and impose their own rule over Lemuria. Armed with this knowledge, Ethan realized he had no choice but to act. The confrontation took place at the ruins where Ethan had first arrived in Lemuria. Under the cover of night, Ethan and his allies made their way to the site, knowing Evelyn and Victor would be there attempting to harness the artifact's lingering magic. When they arrived, they found the two conspirators surrounded by shadowy figures, agents loyal to their cause. Evelyn stood confidently, holding the glowing artifact aloft, while Victor prepared spells to defend them. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the danger. "This ends now," he said firmly. Evelyn laughed coldly, dismissing him as a fool. "You think you can stop us? You're just a powerless human playing at being a hero." Her words stung, but Ethan refused to back down. "Maybe I don't have magic, but I'm not alone." With that, Lily, Finn, and Clara moved to stand beside him. Together, they formed a united front, ready to face whatever came next. That Victor sneered and unleashed a barrage of spells, sending waves of fire and ice toward them. Evelyn joined the attack, her agents closing in from all sides. The battle that followed was chaotic and intense. Finn wielded a hammer imbued with protective enchantments, deflecting magical blasts, while Clara summoned roots and vines to entangle their enemies. Lily used her limited combat magic to create barriers and heal wounds, keeping everyone safe as best she could. Ethan, lacking any offensive abilities, relied on quick thinking and strategy. He noticed patterns in Victor's spellcasting and shouted instructions to his friends, helping them anticipate attacks and counter effectively. When Evelyn tried to retreat with the artifact, Ethan sprinted after her, dodging spells and leaping over obstacles. In a desperate moment, he tackled her to the ground, causing the artifact to slip from her grasp. As the fighting raged on, Ethan's determination inspired others to join the fray. Villagers who had once doubted him now rushed to aid his cause, unwilling to let Evelyn and Victor destroy the peace they cherished. Even some of the nobles who had wavered in their support turned against the conspirators, realizing the threat they posed to Lemuria as a whole. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide turned decisively. Victor exhausted his magical reserves, leaving him vulnerable to capture. Evelyn, cornered and outnumbered, dropped the artifact and surrendered. The glowing key rolled across the ground, stopping at Ethan's feet. He picked it up carefully, feeling its warmth pulse in his hand. Though victorious, Ethan knew the fight wasn't truly over. Evelyn and Victor's betrayal exposed cracks in Lemuria's foundation, cracks that ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. As dawn broke over the horizon, Ethan looked around at the faces of those who had fought alongside him. They were tired but hopeful, united by a common purpose. For the first time since arriving in this strange world, Ethan felt like he belonged, not because he had magic, but because he had earned their trust. With the immediate threat neutralized, Ethan turned his thoughts to what lay ahead. The prophecy Clara mentioned weighed heavily on his mind, but he pushed aside doubts and fears. Whatever challenges awaited him, he would face them head-on, guided by the strength of his character and the bonds he had forged. With Evelyn Cross and Victor Kane defeated, Lemuria began the slow process of healing. The conspiracy they had orchestrated left scars across the kingdom, both visible and hidden. Trust had been broken, alliances fractured, and fear lingered in the hearts of many. Yet amidst the chaos, Ethan Cole's actions during the battle at the ruins sparked something unexpected, a glimmer of hope. People talked about how he had united unlikely allies, from humble villagers to skeptical nobles, all working together to protect their world. For the first time in years, Lemuria felt a sense of possibility. King Alden Drake called for a grand assembly in Arcanes to address the aftermath of the conflict. Representatives from every corner of the realm gathered in the palace's grand hall, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution. Ethan stood quietly near the back of the room, feeling out of place despite his recent heroics. He didn't seek recognition or power, but he knew his presence mattered now more than ever. When King Alden rose to speak, the room fell silent. "Have faced betrayal and division," the king began, his voice steady and commanding. "But we have also witnessed courage and unity. Today, we honor those who fought to protect Lemuria, not because of magic, but because of heart." His gaze swept over the crowd before settling on Ethan. "Ethan Cole, though you came to us without magic, you have shown us that true strength lies not in power alone, but in character." A room erupted into applause, though not everyone clapped enthusiastically. Some still viewed Ethan with suspicion, unable to fully accept someone so different from themselves. But most cheered genuinely, moved by his determination and humility. Lily Harper, standing beside him, smiled warmly. She had always believed in Ethan, and seeing others recognize his worth filled her with pride. After the assembly, King Alden invited Ethan to stay in Arcanes as an advisor. The offer was generous, but Ethan declined. He explained that while he cared deeply for Lemuria, his true home was back in Ohio. The thought of leaving pained him. He had grown fond of this magical world and the friends he had made, but he knew he couldn't abandon his old life forever. King Alden understood and respected his decision, though he asked Ethan to remain involved in Lemuria's affairs, if needed. In the days that followed, preparations were made for Ethan's departure. Clara Wells, the druid, studied the artifact that had brought him to Lemuria, ensuring it would work safely to send him home. Finn O'Connell crafted a small token for Ethan, a sturdy pendant engraved with runes, symbolizing friendship and resilience. Even Victor Kane, imprisoned but unbroken, sent a message through guards, asking Ethan to visit him one last time. When Ethan arrived at the dungeon, Victor sneered, but also showed a flicker of respect. "You surprised me, human," Victor admitted, grudgingly. "No magic, yet you bested me. Perhaps there is value in your kind after all." Though his tone remained bitter, Ethan sensed a shift in the sorcerer's attitude. Maybe someday Victor could learn to see beyond magic as the sole measure of worth. Finally, the day of Ethan's departure arrived. The artifact hummed softly as Clara activated its power, creating a shimmering portal similar to the one that had brought him to Lemuria. Friends and allies gathered to say goodbye, their emotions running high. Lily stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've changed us, Ethan," she said softly. "Don't forget us." "I won't," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'll always remember what you've taught me." With one final wave, Ethan stepped through the portal. The swirling colors enveloped him once again, carrying him back to the woods where his journey had begun. When he emerged, the familiar sights and sounds of Maplewood greeted him: the rustling leaves, the distant chirping of crickets, the cool night air. It felt strange, yet comforting to be home. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such an extraordinary experience. Ethan resumed his duties at the library, smiling politely at patrons and recommending books to curious readers. On the surface, nothing seemed different. But inside, Ethan carried memories of Lemuria, its people, and the lessons he had learned. Occasionally, when no one was looking, he touched the pendant Finn had given him, reminding himself of the bonds he had forged. To his surprise, Ethan discovered that Lemuria hadn't completely let him go. One morning, as he sorted books in the library, a scroll appeared on his desk. It shimmered faintly, bearing a message written in elegant script. "Greetings from Lemuria. All is well here thanks to you." The note was unsigned, but Ethan recognized Lily's handwriting. Over time, more messages arrived, updates on Lemuria's recovery, stories of festivals celebrating unity, even playful sketches of the creatures Ethan had grown fond of. These scrolls became a bridge between two worlds, keeping Ethan connected to the magical realm he had come to love. Though he missed Lemuria, he found comfort in knowing he had made a lasting impact. His lack of magic had once seemed like a weakness, but it turned out to be his greatest strength. By relying on logic, creativity, and compassion, he had proven that humanity had its own kind of wonder, one that transcended enchantments and spells. As months passed, Ethan occasionally wandered into the woods, wondering if the artifact might reappear. Part of him hoped it would, giving him another chance to visit Lemuria. But even if it never happened, he knew he had already fulfilled his purpose. He had united a fractured world, inspired trust among strangers, and reminded everyone, including himself, that greatness wasn't defined by power, but by the choices we make and the connections we build. One evening, as Ethan sat on the porch of his modest home, he looked up at the stars. They twinkled brightly, just as they did in Lemuria. Somewhere beyond those distant lights, his friends were looking at the same sky, thinking of him. And though miles and dimensions separated them, Ethan felt closer to them than ever before. In that moment, he realized something profound. Home wasn't just a place, it was the people who believed in you, no matter where you came from or what you lacked. Months turned into a year, and Ethan Cole's life in Maplewood settled into a quiet rhythm. He continued his work at the library, helping patrons find books and occasionally sharing stories about faraway lands, not mentioning, of course, that he had actually been to one. The enchanted scrolls from Lemuria still arrived sporadically, each carrying news of the magical realm he had left behind. Through these messages, Ethan learned how Lemuria was changing. Villages once divided by mistrust now celebrated festivals together. The prophecy tied to his arrival had become a symbol of unity, inspiring hope rather than fear. Yet despite the progress, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his story wasn't truly over. One crisp autumn evening, as Ethan walked home through the woods, he noticed something unusual. The air shimmered faintly ahead of him, just like it had the night he first found the artifact. His heart raced as he approached the source of the glow. There, resting on a mossy rock, was the same ancient key that had brought him to Lemuria. It pulsed gently, as if waiting for him. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to touch it. He had built a life here, simple but fulfilling, and returning to Lemuria would mean leaving all of that behind again. But deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore the call. When Ethan picked up the key, the world dissolved into swirling colors once more. This time, however, the transition felt smoother, as though the artifact recognized him. When the chaos settled, he found himself standing in a familiar place, the ruins where he had confronted Evelyn Cross and Victor Kane. But the scene before him was different. The ruins, once crumbling and overgrown, had been restored to their former glory. Glowing crystals lined the walls, casting soft light across the area. People milled about, laughing and chatting, celebrating what appeared to be some kind of festival. Before Ethan could take it all in, Lily Harper rushed toward him, her face lighting up with joy. "You came back," she said, embracing him warmly. Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of relief and happiness. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he admitted. Lily laughed softly. "We always hoped you would. Lemuria hasn't been the same without you." As they walked through the ruins, Lily explained how much had changed since Ethan's departure. King Alden Drake had stepped down, passing the throne to his daughter, Queen Seraphina, who ruled with wisdom and fairness. The sacred crystal, once a source of contention, now served as a beacon of unity. Its energy used to heal divisions and promote cooperation among the kingdoms. Even those who had once doubted Ethan's intentions now spoke of him with admiration, crediting him with sparking a new era of peace. The festival, Lily revealed, was held in Ethan's honor. Known as the Day of Unity, it marked the anniversary of his victory against Evelyn and Victor. Stalls lined the pathways, selling food, crafts, and trinkets inspired by stories of Ethan's ingenuity. Performers reenacted scenes from his adventures, portraying him as a clever and courageous hero. Ethan watched it all with a mix of pride and disbelief. He had never sought fame or recognition, yet here he was, celebrated as a legend. Throughout the day, Ethan reunited with old friends. Finn O'Connell greeted him with a hearty slap on the back, presenting him with a newly forged pendant to replace the one Ethan had worn thin. Clara Wells shared tales of her travels, explaining how she had spread awareness of the prophecy and encouraged others to embrace diversity and collaboration. Even Victor Kane, now released from prison and working to rebuild his reputation, offered a curt nod of acknowledgement. Though Victor still struggled to fully accept Ethan, his begrudging respect was evident. As night fell, the festivities reached their peak. A grand banquet was held in the central courtyard, illuminated by floating orbs of light. Queen Seraphina stood to address the crowd, her voice ringing clear and strong. Today, we celebrate not just one person, but the spirit of unity he inspired. She declared, Ethan Cole showed us that greatness is not defined by magic or power, but by courage, kindness, and the ability to bring people together. The crowd erupted into cheers, raising glasses in Ethan's honor. Amid the celebration, Ethan reflected on how far Lemuria had come. The fractured kingdoms were now united under a shared vision of harmony. Magic still flowed freely, but it no longer divided those who wielded it from those who did not. Ethan's presence had challenged long-held beliefs, proving that strength could come in many forms. He realized that his journey hadn't just changed Lemuria, it had changed him too. He had started as an ordinary man, unsure of his place in the world, and had grown into someone capable of inspiring others. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself alone for a moment, gazing at the stars. Lily joined him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come here?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "I don't need to wonder," he replied. "Being here showed me that everyone has value, even if they don't fit into expectations. And it taught me that connection matters more than anything else." Lily smiled, leaning slightly closer. "You'll always have a home here, Ethan. Whether you stay or go, Lemuria will always be part of you." The next morning, Ethan prepared to leave once again. The artifact awaited him, glowing faintly as if urging him onward. Though tempted to stay, Ethan knew his true home was in Maplewood. He said his goodbyes, promising to return whenever Lemuria needed him. As he stepped through the portal, the familiar swirl of colors enveloping him, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had entered Lemuria as a powerless human and emerged as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even without magic, humanity had its own kind of wonder. Back in Ohio, Ethan resumed his quiet life, carrying the lessons of Lemuria with him. The enchanted scrolls continued to arrive, keeping him connected to the friends and world he cherished. Occasionally, he would wander into the woods, half expecting the artifact to reappear. Whether it did or not, Ethan knew he had already fulfilled his purpose. By embracing his differences and inspiring unity, he had proven that greatness wasn't about power, was about the strength to believe in yourself and the courage to connect with others.